All right. So the other thing about podcasting that you need to know is okay. I don't know. I feel like I've been doing a tutorial talking about my podcast. Okay. So, but yeah, I've been talking about my podcast anyway, but in just a certain way. So, this part I'm going to talk about. What am I going to talk about though? I'm going to talk about podcast directories or podcast listening platforms. So these are the things like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. This is where people listen now. There's the hosting and there's where people listen on the podcast. Someone can actually download your podcast through an RSS feed and just listen to your content. But they can use an app instead of using an RSS feed because it's just a link that opens into a page on a Chrome browser and you can listen to it or whatever browser. But someone can have an app that helps with making life better when it comes to listening to something because it remembers where you left it off. It can whatever do whatever people need, maybe increase the speed or alert you when there's a new podcast. It's just an app that just makes access feeds easier to listen to. So Apple Podcast is one of the most famous ones because of the iPhone users that are there, and it's something that comes inbuilt, and it's free. If I'm not wrong, yeah, it should be free. Then there's Spotify, which is there's a free plan which comes with ads, but there's a paid plan which is um, affordable. Yeah. But the problem with the Spotify thing is it's not in all countries. For example, in Africa, I think there are, I don't know how many countries, like three of Spotify. Like, I think it even came to Kenya recently. So, literally 1 year. I don't know how long it has been, but it hasn't stayed here for a while. It never used to be that we used to use, I don't know, some group, whatever weird methods just to get to listen to something on Spotify. But now it's in Kenya, but it's not in other countries. So if you want to reach out to someone, for example, in Tanzania, then you won't get them through Spotify, but it's a good platform to reach out to Kenyans or to people who use Spotify in other countries, especially Western countries. Um, yeah, Spotify is one of the most popular. Apple is one of the most popular, but the audience mainly is people who can afford iPhones. So you will miss out on people who don't have Android users if you just post it on Apple. Then Spotify is more common across platforms, but it's limited in terms of countries. The other common listening platform that it is free actually is Google Podcast. I think Google Podcast is available in all countries because Google I think is available in all countries except the weird few countries that are not on internet. But with Google, once your podcast is on Google Podcast, you're sorted. The only disadvantage is Google Podcast. The advantage is you can be gotten easier on search engines, whatever. So SEO is good with Google Podcast, but the problem with Google Podcast is if you've created individual podcast artworks, they cannot be seen, and it shrinks up the podcast artwork. That's the only disadvantage with Google Podcast, but it is good to reach out to people. You get stats, you can get on board stats on subscribers who've subscribed to you, whatever. It's the same with Apple Podcast and Spotify. All of these three have individual dashboards that, as a podcaster, you can see who's watching. Especially with Spotify, you can see when they're dropping off. You can see who's starting, how many minutes they watched. Just get a very good statistics. Even with the Google Podcast, they have a good amount of good statistics and just knowing where did the users come from, is it Google, as in it's just having your or if you have your podcast on these three platforms, then you're sorted. Like you don't have to think really much about anything else. But there are other platforms that are there that you can distribute them on. Others come automatically. There are certain platforms that like Castbox or Overcast where they pick up things that are already on Apple Podcasts and add them on the apps just to help you get more listeners. But there are other platforms like Podchaser or Stitcher or TuneIn where you have to submit the podcast to that platform so that people who are on that platform can use it. Like Deezer also, you have to do that. Audible, you have to do that. Especially Amazon products, you have to submit, and it's a good thing to submit because there's also users who use that. Yeah, there are so many podcast listening platforms out there. It's just that to consider where are your like Castbox. You can't miss to have your podcast on Castbox because it's one of the free platforms that people can use, especially in Kenya. So Castbox, Spotify, especially in Kenya, and Google Podcasts, you're good, and Apple Podcasts for the iPhone users in Kenya. But the rest you can add. You don't have to add, but feel it's good to be reachable on all platforms because the people who do not have do not want to listen to stuff on this, or maybe they listen to radio like tune in, they listen to radio, and they use the same platform to also listen to podcasts. So it's a good add-on. How do you submit this podcast? There are different, for Buzzsprout it helps you because it has different ways on, like it has different tutorials you can click on and see how to do that even inside the dashboard and submit it, or they can submit it for you. But I think Buzzsprout you have to submit it yourself. They just help you in figuring out how to submit. With Anchor, they submit for you in most, but not all. It has a lesser list when compared to Buzzsprout, but it submits to the main platforms. And one platform they don't listen to submit is, of course, Spotify. Now, you have an option of not submitting to other platforms, especially if it's in exclusive Spotify. I think that's why it is there, but I don't think anyone does that unless you've been commissioned by Spotify to do your podcast only on Spotify. But you have an option to distribute the content yourself. Yeah, but it helps you. It can actually submit it for you, and you just have to wait for them to approve. You can also have the option of submitting it yourself, and you can always Google that to know how to submit to a certain platform that you want to submit it to. That's Acast does the same as Buzzsprout, I think. Yeah, where they just get you the RSS feed, and they help you know how to submit, and you just submit to the directories. So that's it about some podcast directories when it comes to podcast listening platforms. But you have to be very keen on where are the Kenyan listeners listening to. If your target audience that you're targeting is Kenyan, then be very keen on the directories that you've submitted them to and how clear they are and the capabilities, and if they have these buttons like follow, is it follow, is it subscribe, is there a place to review, like a review button was added to Spotify recently. You can use a review, but you cannot add like what's that thing that can be seen, I'm not sure, but I always see reviews. You can always review. Apple Podcast you can review and people can see. Castbox the same, people can comment. So, but there are others that don't have that, just follow button that is there. So you just have to be familiar with. I can always download and see how a platform looks like. Maybe search for a podcast on that platform and see what people can see on their end and what they can do with it and how they can interact with you. The good thing with, okay, I'll talk about that later.